My name is Isabella, and the entire devastating financial crisis that nearly ended my stability began with a cold, unforgiving, impersonal letter from my cousin Robert. The letter, delivered on heavy, expensive legal stationery, was titled, with sickening formality, Final Determination of Estate Assets. Robert, the smarmy, self-appointed executor of my late grandmother's estate, stated with chilling clinical finality that the family home, the Hearth, the very foundation of my childhood and the last tangible piece of my grandmother's legacy, was structurally unsound, riddled with dated features, and effectively worthless in the current competitive modern market. His determination was brutal and final. The property value was assessed at a mere laughable $250,000, and he insisted it had to be sold immediately, without delay, to cover outstanding estate taxes and mounting administrative fees. The laughably low number was not just a financial insult. It was a clear, blatant lie. But Robert, cloaked in self-righteous legal authority, was determined to sell the house quickly and dismiss my desperate protests as merely naive sentimentality. The emotional wound was profound. The house was the last place I felt connected to my grandmother. I ignored the paralyzing grief and started the agonizing process of cleaning out the old kitchen, the most cherished room in the house, beginning with the cluttered shelves above the stove, where the old, grease-stained, heavy oak recipe box sat waiting. This was the moment everything changed, the precise moment my debilitating grief hardened into cold, quiet, unwavering, strategic resolve. The worn heavy oak recipe box was dense with decades of holiday tradition, memories, and thick index cards held together by ancient rubber bands. It contained every single holiday menu dating back to the 1960s, every handwritten note on pie crust and pastry texture, and the star attraction, my grandmother's notorious, complex Turducken recipe, complete with meticulous notes on gravy viscosity and specialized basting times. I lifted the entire stack of cards, ready to place them safely into a memory bin for safekeeping, when my fingers brushed against something hard and flat taped firmly and deliberately to the underside of the box's lid. My heart began to pound with a frantic, sudden, terrifying realization that this placement was no accident. It was a final, coded message meant only for me. With trembling fingers, I carefully peeled back the stiff, aged packing tape, exposing a pristine, official document beneath. It was a formal property appraisal, commissioned and dated just 3 months before my grandmother's passing. The title was bold, undeniable, and shocking, Confidential Appraisal Report. My eyes darted immediately to the massive figures on the cover page. The value was not the paltry $250,000 Robert claimed. The true, assessed market value of the Hearth was a staggering $1.20 million. My cousin's massive, cruel lie, his attempt at financial decimation, was now staring me directly in the face, hidden by the very person he thought he could fool with bureaucratic nonsense. The initial shock was immediately replaced by a chilling, absolute clarity that cut through my lingering sorrow. This wasn't just a simple valuation discrepancy, it was irrefutable, physical evidence of calculated fraud and a massive abuse of fiduciary power. The appraisal was signed and notarized by Markowitz Appraisals, a respected, old-school firm that had served our family for decades and was beyond reproach. The date was critical. It was after Robert had been appointed executor, but before he sent his worthless letter, proving premeditation and planning. My grandmother, clearly anticipating Robert's greedy nature and treachery, hadn't just gotten the appraisal. She had deliberately hidden it in the most sentimental, least expected place in the entire house, knowing I would be the one to eventually find the recipes. She had armed me from the grave with the definitive truth. I sat back heavily on the cold tile floor, clutching the recipe box and the $1 million document, realizing the horrifying truth. Robert was planning to force the sale of the house for $250,000 to a shell company or developer, claim the house was properly liquidated in the estate, and then pocket the resulting $950,000 difference, a sum that represented my inheritance. This was a direct criminal act of theft against the estate and against my future. I instantly understood the immense financial and emotional stakes that were now in play. The $950,000 Robert planned to steal wasn't just money. It represented the total, devastating demolition of my grandmother's legacy and the financial stability she intended to pass on to me. I realized that my cousin, driven by a long-simmering, toxic resentment toward my grandmother's unwavering favor for me, saw this executor role as his one golden chance for ultimate payback and personal enrichment. I couldn't just expose him casually. I had to utterly dismantle his plan without him ever knowing I possessed the truth until the final legal moment. My strategy had to be flawless, quiet, and absolutely lethal, executed entirely in secret under his arrogant nose. I secured the appraisal, folding it carefully into a safe deposit box downtown, and then walked back into the kitchen, adopting a perfect mask of defeated resignation. I needed Robert to believe that his initial lie had worked, that I was financially naive, and that his victory was assured. My internal state shifted violently from raw grief to cold, focused purpose. My first tactical move was to entirely eliminate Robert's burgeoning suspicion. I called him later that afternoon, my voice carefully modulated to convey sorrow, exhaustion, and complete resignation. "Robert," I said softly, injecting a slight tremble into my voice, "I know you said the house is worthless, and it hurts profoundly, but I understand the estate urgently needs liquidity. I agree to the sale and won't fight you on the price." He responded with immediate, oily satisfaction, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "I know this is hard, Isabella, but it's the right financial choice. I'm rushing the closing to minimize the hassle and the legal fees." He took the bait perfectly. The ease of my submission only confirmed his ingrained, preconceived notion that I was too emotionally weak and financially unsavvy to pose a threat. He would rush, he would become arrogant, and he would make mistakes that would expose him entirely. I needed him to believe the battle was definitively over, so that he would lower his guard completely while I prepared the devastating legal counterstrike. This period of feigned defeat was agonizing, forcing me to internalize his condescension, but it was crucial for the eventual success of my quiet revenge. Robert's arrogance intensified, accelerating his timetable and leading him to commit further, fatal errors that would later cement his legal guilt. He immediately rushed the closing date, insisting on liquidating the asset within 10 days, a legally short and suspicious time frame. He claimed the hurry was due to developer impatience and unforeseen tax deadlines, but I knew the true, urgent motive. He needed the fraudulent transaction finalized before anyone else could question the absurdly low $250,000 figure. The specific buyer, he revealed with a forced, overly casual tone, was the Apex Group, a name I had never heard of, but which instantly raised my deepest suspicion. Why would a reputable developer buy a worthless house for only $250,000? I made a mental note of the name, knowing it was likely a shell corporation he secretly controlled. I spent the next few days gathering external evidence, cross-referencing Apex Group's minimal online presence, while still maintaining my facade of mournful cooperation. I signed the initial pre-sale disclosure documents without a single complaint, knowing the contract he was drafting was based on a fundamental, criminal lie that the true appraisal would soon expose. The need for external confirmation and unassailable legal leverage was paramount to proving criminal intent, moving beyond circumstantial evidence. My first real action was contacting Markowitz, the appraiser who signed the secret $1.2 million document. I arranged a clandestine meeting outside of his office hours, approaching him not as a beneficiary, but as a deeply concerned party with irrefutable knowledge of the fraud. I showed him Robert's official executor letter, citing the fraudulent $250,000 valuation. Markowitz paled instantly, recognizing the legal danger Robert had placed him in. When I then produced the genuine hidden $1.2 million appraisal with his own signature, he nearly collapsed with fear and remorse. He admitted, with shaking hands, that Robert had threatened his career and financial stability, coercing him into creating the fraudulent $250,000 low valuation specifically for court disclosure. The honest appraiser, now terrified of the criminal legal exposure, immediately offered to testify on my behalf. This testimony was the missing link, proof that the low valuation was not an error, but a forced criminal act orchestrated by the executor himself. The quiet courage of Mr. Markowitz gave me both irrefutable physical proof and a key witness. With the physical evidence and the key witness secured, I launched the legal counteroffensive. I contacted the sharpest, most relentless estate litigation lawyer in the city, Thomas Varick, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and discretion. I presented him with Robert's initial $250,000 executor determination, followed by the original $1.2 million appraisal found in the recipe box, and the signed affidavit from Markowitz confirming the coercion. Thomas, initially reserved, whistled softly when he reviewed the overwhelming stack of documents. "This isn't just executor misconduct, Isabella," he stated, his voice low with professional seriousness. "This is open and shut criminal fraud, and a massive breach of fiduciary duty. We have the motive, the proof, and the witness willing to testify." We immediately began drafting a sealed motion, a legal petition hidden from public view and, crucially, hidden from Robert, to freeze all of Robert's personal assets and the imminent sale of the house. We needed to strike hard and fast, cutting off Robert's escape routes before he finalized the fraudulent closing. Robert, meanwhile, utterly oblivious to the massive legal storm gathering around him, hosted an aggressive open house event, claiming it was necessary to speed up the sale. I attended the open house, not as the heir, but as an anonymous prospective buyer, maintaining my perfect facade of defeat. It was agonizing walking through the home, listening to Robert's slick salesman patter, describing the home he wanted to sell for a fraction of its worth. He bragged openly about the fast timeline and the amazing deal the Apex Group was getting. While there, I covertly took dozens of pictures and recorded audio of Robert's statements, documenting his continued misrepresentation of the property's true worth. This evidence, gathered under false pretense, would prove that even during the estate administration process, he was actively misrepresenting the value to accelerate the fraudulent transaction. The emotional cost was high, but the evidence was crucial to prove willful intent and bolster the legal case. The trap was timed perfectly for maximum impact and minimal time for Robert to react. Just 2 hours before the rushed closing appointment with the Apex Group, Thomas struck with devastating force. He filed the temporary restraining order and the order to show cause with the court. The TRO, based on the secret $1.2 million appraisal and Markowitz's affidavit, immediately froze the sale of the Hearth and prohibited Robert from accessing any funds related to the estate or from liquidating his own personal assets. The effect was instantaneous and paralyzing. The closing title company, legally bound by the court order, notified Robert that the transaction was halted indefinitely due to allegations of material misrepresentation. The look on Robert's face when he received the call must have been priceless, transitioning from arrogant triumph to sheer, white-knuckled panic. Robert's reaction was immediate and exactly what I anticipated. He exploded in blind, uncontrolled panic. He immediately called me, yelling incoherently, his carefully constructed facade of professional calm crumbling entirely. "Isabella, what the hell have you done? You sabotaged the only deal. You're costing the estate hundreds of thousands in legal fees." He was entirely focused on the TRO, assuming I was throwing a desperate, last-minute legal tantrum based on feelings, not facts. He demanded that I immediately withdraw the motion. I remained perfectly calm, letting him vent his rage, recording every single word of his implied threats and fury. His explosive reaction, captured on audio, confirmed his deep, personal financial involvement in the fraudulent deal. I hung up the phone and quietly forwarded the TRO notice, not to Robert, but to the legal counsel for the Apex Group, legally linking Robert's low valuation to the formal court document alleging criminal misconduct. The house was frozen, and the web of his deceit was tightening around him. The legal process accelerated violently, moving immediately into the emergency hearing. Robert was immediately summoned to an emergency court hearing before a no-nonsense probate judge known for his zero-tolerance policy on fraud. He walked in, still sweating and arrogant, assuming it was a simple procedural delay, a brief argument to lift the TRO and force the quick sale. He was entirely focused on discrediting me, the emotional heir. He had no idea Thomas and I had concealed the existence of the secret, higher appraisal. The plan was to let him present his defense, based entirely on his fraudulent $250,000 valuation, before unleashing the true weapon. The suspense was unbearable. Watching Robert posture and preen, confidently lying to the court, knowing the truth was folded neatly inside Thomas's briefcase, was the ultimate catharsis. The showdown in the courtroom was the defining moment of my vindication. Robert's lawyer began the defense, confidently presenting Robert's official executor determination letter, detailing the house's poor condition and submitting the fraudulent $250,000 appraisal as the sole, objective proof of value. Robert, sitting confidently at the defense table, smirked at me, believing he had won the argument. Then Thomas stood up. He walked calmly, deliberately to the bench and submitted a single, pristine document. The judge's eyes widened immediately as he read the title. "Mr. Thorne," the judge stated, his voice dangerously low and full of menace, "can you explain why the estate file contains a separate, certified appraisal for the same property, signed by Markowitz Appraisals, stating the value is $1.20 million?" The air went out of the room. Robert's face went white. He knew instantly the game was over. The collapse was total and immediate. Robert stumbled over incoherent excuses, claiming a simple clerical error and frantically denying all knowledge of the $1.2 million document. Thomas immediately called Markowitz to the stand. The appraiser, terrified but honest, confirmed the coercion, detailing exactly how Robert had demanded the fake $250,000 valuation to justify a quick, low-cost sale. He confirmed the integrity of the hidden $1.2 million appraisal. The judge, having heard the testimony and seen the two conflicting documents, didn't hesitate. He declared a massive breach of fiduciary duty and immediately voided Robert's executor authority. The subsequent order was swift. The court immediately froze all of Robert's personal assets and bank accounts, pending a full forensic audit. The investigation into criminal fraud was officially launched, sealing Robert's fate. The speed of justice was brutal and absolute. Robert, realizing the gravity of the situation, asset freeze, criminal charges, and professional ruin, attempted a desperate, pathetic escape. As the judge finished his pronouncement, Robert leaped from his chair and lunged violently toward the courtroom doors. He was immediately intercepted by two massive bailiffs, who slammed him against the wall and detained him. The humiliation was absolute. The man who had schemed to steal nearly $1 million was now being restrained in public view, his expensive suit crumpled and ruined. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the scrape of the chairs. I watched, feeling not triumph, but a quiet, powerful sense of immutable justice. With Robert stripped of his authority and facing criminal charges, I was immediately granted interim control of the estate by the court. The home, the Hearth, was saved, but the legal chaos continued. The house remained tied up in forensic audit as investigators tried to determine the full scope of Robert's fraud. While sorting through the estate files he had left behind, I found the original sale contract he had secretly executed with the Apex Group. The final piece of evidence. The contract clearly listed Robert's personal home address as the contact address for the Apex Group, proof that the developer was indeed his shell company, established purely to facilitate the fraudulent sale. This discovery was crucial for the financial recovery. Thomas immediately filed a motion based on the Apex Group contract, legally exposing Robert's shell company. The court acted fast, recognizing the transparent attempt to launder the stolen profits. All assets held by the Apex Group were also immediately frozen and ceased to repay any estate funds Robert had already managed to steal or spend. This financial decimation ensured that Robert, the arrogant executor, would walk away with absolutely nothing. No home, no stolen profits, and no personal wealth. My grandmother's legacy was secured, and the integrity of her estate was restored through the sheer power of the hidden truth. The press, of course, caught wind of the spectacular downfall. The story was a goldmine. Corrupt executor busted by grandmother's secret Turducken Recipe Box, linking sentimentality, high finance, and criminal greed. The public vindication was overwhelming. I received hundreds of messages of support and admiration for my composure and quiet strength. The narrative was reversed entirely. I was no longer the emotionally naive heir. I was the sharp, resilient woman who exposed $1 million fraud using nothing but her grandmother's foresight. With the legal storm subsiding and the financial recovery secured, I chose not to sell the Hearth immediately. The house needed more than just a buyer. It needed healing. I dedicated the next 6 months to restoring the home, not renovating it for profit, but repairing the damage caused by Robert's neglect and my own grief. I used the money recovered from Robert's seized assets to lovingly refurbish the kitchen, keeping the old recipe box in a place of honor. This period of restoration was essential for my emotional recovery, turning the monument of betrayal back into a source of enduring legacy and peace. The inevitable, final act of humiliation occurred when Robert, stripped of all assets and facing severe criminal penalties, desperately contacted me from custody. He wrote a rambling, pathetic letter begging for my leniency, appealing to our shared family history, and claiming he made a terrible mistake born of temporary desperation. He offered me a pittance of a settlement if I would simply withdraw my testimony. I read the letter, feeling no hatred, only profound pity for his utter failure. My response to his final desperate plea was measured, cold, and final. I instructed Thomas to send a short, formal legal reply denying the request. Then, I wrote a personal note on the back of a photocopy of his initial, fraudulent letter. I mailed it to his lawyer, ensuring it would be the last thing he ever received from me. The note was simple, devoid of rage, carrying the full weight of the emotional and financial truth. The hearth was never worthless, Robert. You were. The financial resolution arrived 12 months after the initial fraud was exposed. The house, finally put on the open market, sold quickly for its full, verified value of $1.20 million. The substantial profit, once held hostage by Robert's fraud, now funded my new life and my grandmother's true intention. The sale was a quiet, powerful moment of release, closing the door on the painful chapter of betrayal and opening the door to a future defined by my own integrity. My victory was complete, but my work was not done. I used a significant portion of the profit to start a foundation dedicated to elder estate protection, offering free legal consultation to beneficiaries targeted by corrupt executors. I secured my grandmother's true legacy, turning her betrayal into a shield for others. I kept the Turducken Recipe Box, now a treasured symbol of strength, not just sentimentality. I realized that the greatest fortune she left me was not the money, but the simple, powerful lesson. Always check the places where love and trust blind you the most.